I want you all to know how glad I am that you're here. This is a special day in a lot of ways. I'm not gonna get into this in any detail, but I wrote probably 20 pages of stuff other than song lyrics in this book. And the song lyrics were already done. And so when I first thought of doing the project, I thought, well, that's a done deal. Took me 6 years to write 20-some pages. The reason being that those connections between my brain and what I can dig out of those dusty corners in my memory banks are pretty dusty and pretty far back. So I had to spend a lot of time remembering, and I had to spend a lot of time asking people questions who remembered and had told me stories my whole life about things that I had done. First part of the book has a little section in it that is some history. It tells you how a guy who's 80 years old and still doing it came from being a baby to writing songs and still doing it. So it was a really fun project, but one that required a lot of work and a lot of thought. And I want you to know that this book is really me being me, y'all. And it's not, there's no claim to wisdom. There's no claim to anything other than being who I am and what I do, and writing things down, and sometimes turning them into songs, and sometimes letting them turn yellow in a drawer somewhere, and maybe never seeing them again. I've got drawers full, and as long as I've got them, and as long as I can still type on a computer's keyboard or write with a pencil, I'll keep doing that. So the book has just my solo write songs, and there was a reason for that. I wanted for you to see my development as a songwriter before I reached the point where I decided that music is a team sport. And now I realize even more after being involved with friends like Rob and the guys out at the studio, and friends that play and friends that come and listen, that we're all involved in it together. And so it was important to me to have as many of you who here who could be, and I understand how life works, and some people may still be here in a few minutes, but it's not about numbers. It's about me being able to share with you and you being able to share with me. And I'm most excited probably about giving you the opportunity to have some time with each other as well. So the plan is, I'm going to shut up in a minute. I'm going to pass it over to Amelia. And Amelia is going to read for me because I don't read so well out loud anymore. And then if we've got some time and you have specific questions, then I will answer some brief questions. And then I'm going to sit in the corner and sign some books if anybody wants them signed. And you guys are going to visit with each other. And so, Amelia Boyd, my baby girl.
So we picked out, there's 8 decades worth of music in this book. So we went through and picked one song from each decade. And I'm gonna do every other decade right now. And then if we end up doing another round of this in a little while, I'm gonna do the others. So I'm gonna read a little bit from that intro to just kind of give you a little bit of the backstory, and then we'll jump into the lyrics. I will say that his music, phrasing-wise, is sometimes hard to follow. So just, I apologize in advance if I stumble. So this is from a section called How I Came to Be. Since writing this book, and each song in it for that matter, is something like posting selfies made with words, and my goal is for you to see me better and clearer. I'm thinking a brief historical, sometimes hysterical, grouping of written snapshots of me in the process of becoming a songwriter may help to clear the fog for me as well as for you. By saying that, I am not suggesting that the process has come to an end or will. It is still unfolding, and like any kind of learning, we do it until we drop. Like the fiction to fact ratio of my lyrics, my memories of how what skill I've developed has unfolded over time involve actual recollections, stories I've been told, creative twists and turns, and fanciful fabrications. Let me put these on. I'm not sure I know one from the other, or that it matters much at my age. I've outlived most potential naysayers. Doing this project has me learning as I go and remembering more as the process calls for me to think about it and dig it out. I will tell you how I see it. It's all I have to tell. Just like writing a song, my story or its meaning teaches me the things I didn't know before it came. There was an early pivotal event. On October 9th, 1950, my 8th birthday, I was given what I asked for, a transistor radio and a bunch of batteries. Beyond my 8th birthday and for years to come, until I could get out and find the music live, I would hide under a tent of bed covers to keep the sound dampened down. Keep tuning the station dial until I landed on something that made me feel good, and do that until I could no longer stay awake. As a boy, I spent countless hours being schooled in the craft of songwriting in that blanket fort. All right. So the first song is from 1957, and it's called I'll Meet You in the Lab. Dad was 15 when he wrote this song for a first girlfriend or a girl that he had a crush on. It's not been recorded yet, but it is destined to be. So. Oh, I ran from you when I realized that I did not know your ways, that it would likely take me days to learn them. The masks I made and then forgot, when I didn't know if I should ask or not, all the notes I wrote only to burn them. Back in my comfort zone, in my own personal space, with nothing in my mind to take its place. On my way home, my fear took flight and left me in between, and the day just disappeared without a trace. There's this chemistry, but I've always found it hard to make the grade, so I never stayed around long enough to find out how much of each of us it takes to make us show up but not blow up. I showed some of myself to you, and it's true, I saw some of you too, but I didn't wait for the review before I figured out what to do. And I jumped back in my dreams and schemes, or at least today that's how it seems, and I didn't even wait for them to come true. With no one but myself to face, I think I finally found my pace, and almost right away I knew it was okay, and the day just reappeared in a better place. Without a measure of regret, it just hasn't happened yet, and when it does, it's gonna be a gas, I bet. Hey, grab that Bunsen burner, flag down that cab. When you got a little time to partner up, I'll meet you in the lab. This next one is from 1972, and it's called The Truth Is. I really love this one, and he recorded this with my cousin Alice. It's a really beautiful one recorded. So, the truth is, where you find it don't matter. Get yourself behind it, don't scatter your light. The only way to give it is to find it and to live it. The truth is where you find it. The truth is. It could be in a book or a painting you took from a pile by the side of the road. It could be in a grin on the face of a friend, helps you see how to lighten your load. Or it could appear in the music you hear. It could be in the words of a song. Or it could be, yes, it could be, right there in your heart all along. The truth is, where you find it don't matter. Get yourself behind it, don't scatter your light. The only way to give it is to find it and to live it. The truth is, where you find it, the truth is. It could be in a note, something that someone wrote. You read and the meaning comes clear. It could be in the eyes of an elder so wise who tells you there's nothing to fear. Or it could be there in the common or rare. It could be written right on your wall. Or it could be, yeah, it could be, right there in your heart after all. All right,
Thanks.
skipping 2 decades again, 1999. This is from Daddy-O's days, for those of you who know the Daddy-O's. This one is called Pawn Shop Diamond Ring. You want to say anything about it?
I'll say there's a little bit of history to this one, but I wrote this one for Carol Boyd on our 30th anniversary, I think, and it tells a true story, and one she's cool with. That's important. I mean, I got her a diamond ring and a guitar deal. That's the whole truth.
All right, I bought my pretty baby a pawn shop diamond ring. I got my little lady a pawn shop diamond ring, a little something semi-precious for my most precious thing. And I never missed a payment on that 6-month layaway. No, I never missed a one payment on that 6-month layaway. Yesterday I hit my number and I paid it off today. When I slipped it on her finger, her eyes outshine that stone. When I slipped it on her finger, her eyes outshine that stone. Like a little bitty child with a great big ice cream cone. I love the way that diamond shines upon your little hand. Yeah, I love the way it sparkles all up on your little hand. And it tells everybody you're my woman and I'm your man. It's interesting when you know these songs, it's really hard to read them. But I'm not prepared to sing for you all today. All right. So then skipping ahead again, this is after Dad spent some time, you'll read a little bit about this in the book, with a group of songwriters called Soul Kitchen. And also after he started having grandbabies. So this one is a blues lullaby. It's from 2011 and it's called Baby Magic Blues. You tried to hold and rock 'em, you walked 'em all around, wore some bald spots in your carpet, but they just won't settle down. You put 'em in their car seats and you took a big long ride. You fed 'em and you changed 'em, but they won't be pacified. If you need some baby magic, well, I'm just right down the street. Bring 'em down to Poppy's, let me blues 'em off to sleep. You told 'em bedtime stories and you hummed some lullabies. Turned the light off in their bedroom, but they still won't close their eyes. Done everything you can, run out of things to do. Time to find some other way, gotta think of something new. If you need some baby magic, well, I'm just right down the street. Bring 'em down to Poppy's, let me blues 'em off to sleep.
Thanks, guys. Having grandbabies changes things. It's nice.
And that's all I have to read for right now. I'll ask the first question because he's prepared for this one, but
Gotta make sure.
But what's Paper Plates all about?
Okay. Actually, someone said they were gonna ask me this, and I thought about it. Okay, it has lots of meanings. Paper Plates is reflective, I think, of the kind of informality that has followed me around and said, this is where you need to be and who you need to be with. People who can live in that sort of informal, let's take each other as we are and go from there. It also speaks to how, first of all, music has fed me for what now? I mean, if I wrote that song in 1957, which was the first one I identified as a song I had written, and we're in 23 now, that's
A lot of years.
65, 66 years. So it's fed me for a long time. But, and I'm thankful for that, and I have been richly fed. The other thing it's allowed me to do, and this is my hope and what I set out to do, was to feed other people with ideas, with just what my brain does sometimes with playing word games. All of my songs don't mean anything, you guys. I mean, they mean something to me, they may mean something entirely different to you. So, but the whole concept of paper plates, and when you see the book cover, you'll notice that on the front of the book cover is a collection of all of those things that I talked about being in drawers and stuck away in the house somewhere here or there. There's a paper plate on there on which one afternoon I wrote a song in a circle on a paper plate. Don't ask me why. I just did that. So that whole concept sort of builds how this part of my life has been one of the rich things in my life. Obviously my family, my children, my grandchildren, my wife, my dog. You know, all of those things are richnesses in my life. This is one I have spent an amazing amount of time on, and when I was working, it never stopped. We were able to identify a song not only in every decade, but in every year of every decade. I wrote at least one song because it's in the book. You know, now there were years I didn't write many because Carol was in graduate school, I was working full time, we were building a house, we were raising 4 kids, we were trying to get kids to activities. Y'all all know all this, I won't say a whole lot more, but it was a special part, was and is a special part in my life. That's probably enough, isn't it? Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I'm curious, to have something that you wrote in 1957, how in the world did you keep up with it this long? I mean, that's a couple of weeks, dude.
It is, and some of that paper is brittle and yellow. It is because I never throw anything away, Lee. I say, I might need that. I may write a song about that yet, you know. And sometimes when I'm feeling like writing but don't have a specific idea, I get a handful of those things out and go through them and say, ooh, maybe I could go here with that. And sometimes that song means something different to me now than it did in 1957. So it continues to change in how I look at my words and how I decide for myself a personal meaning. And I could go on and on about how I don't like to talk about meanings of songs because I think ultimately everybody gets there for themselves, and it may mean something absolutely different. I know, Dusty, you've written songs, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Are we gonna hear some? Am I gonna get to hear your songs?
We're not gonna sing today, but we have a playlist that we'll play while we're doing the book signing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have all of this music. First of all, I've put links in the book that'll get you to streaming sites, and I post a song every week on Facebook and on SoundCloud, which is the streaming site that I've chosen to use. So, yeah.
And if you still do CDs, we got a bunch of those at the house.
That's right. Now,
June, I'm really good friends with June. I'm from Minnesota. But we were watching Echo in the Canyon this morning, if you've ever seen that, about the Laurel Canyon, you know, in California, when all the early, you know, the 60s and bands gathered, you know, Joni Mitchell and, you know, the Beach Boys and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I was just wondering what your favorite band is.
Ooh, that's hot.
Yeah, I'll be telling on myself.
Well, that goes back a ways.
Yeah, I
So-
go back a ways too. I don't know how many of you will even know who I'm talking about. Probably my favorite band ever is Little Feat.
Old George.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Lowell George was one of them, and they were special with him, but the thing that impressed me most about that band was how they lived on through all of the changes, Lowell George dying, you know, moving from primarily a band that played his songs to, come in, please. So, but, I mean, I have a richness in exposure to music from, like when I said I got that radio when I was 8 years old. I have heard, written, played, and figured out a way to blend genres of music over all of these years that go from gospel music, spiritual music, country, rock and roll, certainly blues, all of those things. And then I have begun to favor at least blending music in ways that take those genres and put them together. And you can hear influences of not just a country song or not just and we've got all these fancy labels about things like we call music Americana. I don't even know what that means. You know, I mean, I know what they're trying to get across there, that this is a spirit, a thing that we share or that we feel together about it, but I have particularly gotten interested in how you can fit those things together and let those influences show through. I wrote a song which really, and it's probably in the book because it was a solo write, but it was a song that talked about my influences, and it's a long song, but it talks about, the name of the song is Credit Where Credit's Due, and what I was trying to do is remember all the people in just one genre of songs that, that influenced me in very powerful ways and caused me to write many of the songs that I've written. And there's a line in there, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this guy, but there's a man named Willie Dixon who wrote, I don't know how many songs, but the line in the song is, if it wasn't for Willie Dixon, I wouldn't be doing what I do. And that's true about my music, that I feel very deeply about that influence, and I feel very deeply about giving credit to the folks that have influenced me. I could name you a country band that I feel just as fortunate about or as drawn toward listening to sometime. Maybe not a modern radio country song, but I could sure name you some country 80s songs that I liked a lot.
I'll say for years he tried to get me to sing the blues with him, and finally I said, Daddy, you're gonna have to write some country music if you want me to sing with you. So we got a few albums of twang out there now.
Trilogy.
Mine's more of an observation than a question. I've got tears in my eyes. I just remember when I read the 1957 song, I was such a superficial Southern belle at age 15. I was so struck and astounded by your level of awareness, self-awareness. I mean, every line pointed to something in you that I didn't even come near for years, and it was very moving to me somehow, and did shine a big light on Jim Boyd for me.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. I've gotten beyond that now, though, I promise you.
I won't hold you to it.
No, it's all right. I really appreciate you saying that. I work really hard at trying not to take myself too seriously, which is not a lot of work if you want to know the truth. Anyway. What do you guys thinking? How many of you signed up for the first session and said, I'm gonna be here for the first session? I don't know that we shouldn't just go ahead and move, because I know some of the folks didn't see the same kind of I put it up online in a lot of different places and perhaps forgot to even say, let me know which one you're coming to. I don't know, we might just be able to move ahead and do that other little set of 4 more lyrics
Y'all wanna hear a little bit more?
and then I'll sign books and y'all visit with each other, and let's let this thing be what it was intended to be. Celebrating with me, but also having some time with each other to see each other, so. Yeah.
You got a question, John?
It's not so much a question
Okay.
as I just wanna thank you for writing that book, cause I can't wait to read it.
Thank you, John.
It's a lot of fun.
Alright, we're jumping back to 1963. This one's called Another Crossfire. And this was written for a friend of Dad's. His name was Johnny Ralph Kendricks.
Let me jump in just real quick and tell you this little bit of background information. I met Johnny Ralph Kendricks in 1962 in Carrollton, Georgia. I was in college in 1962. I was 20 years old. He had a voice like I've never heard. And I still credit him with being the best non-famous R&B singer that I had ever heard. He came and performed at the college one time, and Otis Redding was going to play a concert on the West Georgia campus in 1962. And Johnny Ralph went on before him, and they kept, Mavis Staples always says the words, and they clapped us back. Well, they kept clapping Johnny Ralph back, and Otis Redding was getting sort of angry about it. Who is this guy? Well, it resolved very nicely, and they got to be friends, and and then he asked Johnny to go on the road, and Johnny said, no, I'm good where I am. He was that kind of a guy too, but he had just the most wonderful, powerful, expressive voice. He also had a tendency to love women and to sometimes love more than one at a time. And we would be in a place and he'd look at me and say, Jim, we got to get out of here, man. I'm in a crossfire. Which meant he was in a crossfire. One or more or two or more or whatever, and we had to hit the road. So anyway, that's where this song comes from, and that history. If he were here today, and he's not, but if he were here today, he would be okay with me telling that story.
Alright. When I go walking out on the streets, no matter where I am in this world, I can't take a step, no, I can't make a move without seeing another pretty little girl. It does no good to try to ignore them. I see more the harder I try. If I make up my mind not to take notice, some sweet little thing comes along and catches my eye. Well, hey, looky yonder, what's that I see? Another pretty little woman looking over and making eyes at me. Went down to the club early last night, determined I wasn't gonna look. Ran into a friend who introduced his sister. Now there's 900 pages in my little black book. I guess it's time I was resigned to the fact, even though sometimes I get tired, I love the girls too much to ever stop looking. Can't help getting caught in that same old crossfire. Well, hey, looky yonder, what's that I see? Another pretty little woman looking over and making eyes at me. Looking over, she's making eyes at me. I'm in another crossfire, another crossfire. All right, 1982. This one's called If I Did, with a subtitle called Postgraduate Breakdown.
Okay, and I have to make mention of this. This song came out of, it's not any of his words, but came out of a conversation that I had with Blaze Foley, who is somebody that I've admired as a songwriter for as long as I've known him. He occasionally would sleep on the sofa in our house, and my children, when they were growing up, thought he was a rock and roll star because he had a record. And he would sleep on the sofa and we would swap songs back and forth. But we had a conversation that years later came back to me in the form of this song. So, it's
Okay. There are questions I could answer if I only knew what for. There are answers I could question if I only had some more. To replace all the others that you hear when you're a kid, but you might not want to hear them if I did. There are pictures I could paint you if I only knew which ones. There are paintings I could picture, but none of them are done. But I don't want to bring them out from where I keep them hid, and you might not want to see them if I did. If I did, yeah, if I did, I wonder what might happen if I did. If I got 'em in the open, I just might flip my lid, and you might not want to be here if I did. There are tall tales I could tell you if I only knew their plots. There are stories that could tell themselves if I made 'em what they're not. And I would gladly sell 'em all to anyone who'd bid, but you might not want to buy them if I did. They're just questions that don't seem to make a difference. There are just answers that don't seem to tell me much. There are just pictures from a time I can't remember. They're just paintings that I cannot see or touch. They're just stories of somebody's misadventures. They're just far-fetched tales that don't come through so clear. So if I get them out or start waving them about, if you're smart, you'll slip out of here. If I did, yeah, if I did, I wonder what might happen if I did. If I got 'em in the open, I just might flip my lid, and you might not want to be here if I did. This one's 2002. This comes out of the twang era. So. This one's called Getting Nowhere Fast. You can bet your lizard skin boots I've been running in circles, but not the social circles you might mean. I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and my life's coming unstitched at all the seams. I spend most of every day making the time to stay right here where I am, getting nowhere fast. I don't get no sleep at night, not off in the broad daylight, and by the time I get to the present, it's gone past. You can bet your bottom dollar I've been living at large, but I don't mean living large like you might think. I've been doing without, like a buzzard where there ain't no roads, and lately I've been feeling like a missing link. I spend most of every day making the time to stay right here where I am, getting nowhere fast. Don't get no sleep at night, not off in the broad daylight, and by the time I get to the present, it's gone past. Alright, this is the last one. This is from 2022. So one of the most recent ones. This one's called On the Other Hand. This one's not been recorded, right?
right.
So, I think I might have let these lines slip too far off what's real to say just what I want to say and stay true to what I feel. So I'll try to keep it simple with words we understand and steer back from the edge of on the other hand. On the other hand, there's the promises we made. On the other hand, there's the cornerstones we laid. On the other hand, there's still bills to be paid, and we can run away or stand on the other hand. I hope that I have kept the words that capture my intent to tell you what I know is true and say just what I meant. So I'll try to keep it grounded to places we can land and not keep flying off to, on the other hand. On the other hand, there's the promises we've made. On the other hand, there's the cornerstones we laid. On the other hand, there's still bills to be paid, and we can run away or stand. On the other hand, there are things that I believe in. There are still things up my sleeve. There are still some songs to sing to you before I take my leave. But, and then the chorus again, and still do the things we planned. On the other hand.
So there are 119 songs in this book, y'all. And there's a really fat period of time when I hooked up with a man named Brian Carter, and some of you know Mark Lyle here in town, who has a music studio and has a rental property business going, and is always running around like a chicken with his head cut off. But there's that more modern, let's see, I started going to the studio with Mark and Brian right after that we had the Soul Kitchen at the house in
That was your 70th
my
birthday.
70th birthday, so.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah, so we've been doing that together for 10 years, and that was a very prolific time, but I was retired from my work, my day job. So there's a very fat section of this book in
2010s, I think
Yeah.
is what we discovered. The 2010s were like 100 and something pages. I was like, whoa, Dad.
so, but there were those years when there was one or two that I kept anyway, so.
When you were going back over it from the get-go through the collaboration stuff, did you know how much things had changed for you in terms of skill?
Yeah, to some extent, I think I did. I mean, I feel like I've improved in some ways. But that's another thing about talking about what songs, like
Yeah.
talking about what songs mean. I mean, I recognize that things are easier for me to do at this point in terms of my being happy with the product. The jury's out on that one, man, I don't know. I think,
Did you think about going back 40 years and just going, okay, I'm gonna keep nothing but the title and do it again?
Have you rewritten any of them that you will look back at?
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but I've also made a big step in a commitment toward collaborative music now. And this is not really answering your question, but sort of gives you a feel for where I might be headed at this point. I left out intentionally any songs that wasn't totally responsible for the words for in this book right here. And I'm not gonna write another book. But I do want to do something, and I've chosen to call it Music is a Team Sport, that is a statement of my strong belief and commitment to give credit to people who have become as integral to my music. I don't ever call it my music anymore. I call it our music. And those guys are as much a contributor to it, either with music or with words. I mean, Mark Lyle and I have written a lot of songs. We're dangerous when we're left unsupervised. We get seriously silly, you know, and just So, and that to me has become a real joy too. And I didn't just learn that in that process. I learned that when I hooked up with those guys from the Songwriter Soul Kitchen, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but there's a man named Vince Dijon Perret. Did I say that about right? Okay. He's in France now. He's known mostly as a percussionist, songwriter, world music person, jazz person. He does a lot of things with a looping deal, and he can make sounds with his voice that end up sounding like an orchestra. He's just an amazing performer, but also a generous person and a believer in collaborative songwriting and in sharing the experience together. And I'm pretty committed to that at this point, and I think that's where I'm headed next, is trying to put a collection of things that I've done. And I wrote the first song, I think the first song I would identify as a co-written song might be that stuff that I did in, early 70s with Paul on Brockett Road in Atlanta at Stone Mountain, almost, you know, writing collaboratively on music. So.
Don't be shy.
You know, I saw a guy Clark perform, and he's a heck of a songwriter too, as you know, and he introduced the song and said, "This is the first song I ever wrote that I kept." Well, there's some that you didn't keep, and is there a backstory?
Oh, absolutely. I should have had a stamp made, unsalvageable. I took care of that. You know, what was he what was I thinking? Yeah, I mean, I've got as many of those scraps of paper with partial songwrites on them that I would stamp unsalvageable as I do, but I don't throw them away because there may be a line. It's that same thing, you know. Any of you guys who keep or have used tools all your life won't ever throw anything away because I'm gonna need that one day. You know what I'm saying? It's that I hesitate to let those things go, and I have this sort of running joke because my friend Glenn, who does special collections at the college, told me one time, you know, I'd kind of like to have your papers for the special collections at the college. And so I got this concept in my mind of getting an old beat up suitcase and putting all those scraps of papers and paper plates and, you know, the back of an old water bill or whatever, and stuff them all in that suitcase and take them to the library and go,
There you go.
there you go, here's my papers.
Come on in.
Hey.
So one thing that Dad and I were talking about writing music recently, and one thing that stuck out to me is that you said that this has been your friend for a really long time. And I think also it's hard to let go of things when it's your friend, you know, and that kind of stands out to me as something that's just like, this has been something that's kept him company in times that were hard and has helped him to celebrate the times that were really good. And that companionship that he gets from the words that he produces, and you know, that then we get to like reap the benefits of too with all the memories. It's been really fun, so.
I don't know if I answered your question, Steve.
That was beautiful. Somebody or another wrote one on a ironing board, I think in the Allman Brothers. It's the only thing in the house in the middle of the night. He wrote a song on an ironing board.
I got one that I wrote about building our house that was, and Ralph handed me, and it was called Owner Builder Blues. You may have heard that song at one time or another because you were sort of at least on the peripheral of that happening and projects at the house too. but I wrote it on a piece of 2x4 with a carpenter's crayon. And I don't still have that 2x4.
It's somewhere in the house.
Yeah.
But what I wrote was, let's see. Dick said I could dig it if you'll just pull me a line. Ralph said we could rig it if we only take our time. You know? There it goes.
That's good, good one.
Yeah.
I have a question for Amelia. I can only imagine the grounding that you got growing up with these two wonderful people, your parents. And so I imagine they had, or your dad had, a great influence in your getting into music. And at what age did you start singing with him? And Jim, I can't imagine the joy of having your daughter sing with you.
I think honestly, for me, I get most of what I got musically from Mom. Because I have been really drawn to doing choral music.
Okay.
So I sang in a multicultural youth choir when I was in high school, and we traveled around the country, and that was really meaningful to me, and I really love singing like choral harmonies. And then Mom's women's chorus that we had for a while, that was really, that was something that really helped me through like raising babies and having a community of women around me, which was really nice. But then it's been later in my life that I got to a point where I was like, I would be picking him up from the studio because he wasn't driving. And I'd pick him up from the studio and he'd say, get in that booth and sing these lines. And I was like, okay. But so then that's when I started saying, all right, Daddy, if you want me to sing with you, you gotta write some country music because that's a little more up my alley for this type of thing. So that's when we started really singing together, was once he was kind of in the studio and I was being his transportation.
I'm addicted to duets, you guys. I'm always grabbing a woman and saying, come on, come on. You know?
I've got to ask you this. I used to write lots of poetry, and of course, I found at an early age, or mid-teens or so, and I wasn't real good with the girls, but man, if I wrote them some poetry, man, I mean, they all of a sudden, everything changed. And so I said, well, this works pretty good, and I wrote me down 4 or 5 of them, which I call my standards. That way I could see what their mood was, and, you know, oh, I got one for that mood, oh, I got one for that mood. You know, those are my standards, so. Did you work your songs that way too when you were young?
How do you think I am?
The confession.
There you go, you got your answer. No. Yeah.
The answer's yes.
Luckily, I ran into Vicky and she taught me how I was supposed to be around her. Thank God.
You know, I want to sign some books for anybody who wants me to do that. And in order to do that, with me being slow and having to be kind of deliberate, I think we sort of reached the place where I need to set myself up at a place. And then any of you who want to get a book and have me sign it, that's fine, but don't feel obligated. I didn't do this as a business venture here, guys. This is a time for us to come around together around something that we've shared together for years. Many of us in here anyway, who've followed. I'm gonna start using this all the time, our music, for ever and ever, it seems like, and that has fed me for